Okay, open your little atheist books. Open your little atheist books to the chapter 2 Embolden questions. So we are on page 18 of your little atheist book. I'm going to give myself more light. The eyes are going too, so. I used to make fun of my parents when they'd be like, hey, read this phone number for me. Now I'm doing that. Okay. So number 1, list the 4 categories of reasons why people believe what they believe. What's one of them? Yes.
Because they're like parents or
Like so the term or the category is sociological. Socio means people, right? So people reasons. So yeah, that could include your parents, your teachers, your friends, society in general, that cause you to believe what you believe. So sociological, is one of them. What's another one? What? Psychological, because it gives us comfort. It gives us meaning. It gives us peace in our hearts and minds. And so sometimes that's because we want to believe it. The Queen died yesterday, um, and there was a meme on Facebook put up by someone who's not a believer, and it's the Queen from behind, and she's holding Paddington Bear's hand, and the Queen says, "Paddington, take me to my husband." Now, that's a little sweet little thing, and it might make someone feel better, but there is. And the purpose of heaven is not to see our loved ones, although I believe we will. The purpose of heaven is God. So sometimes people believe things because it makes them feel better. So that would be psychological. What's a third one? Yes, Aiden. Philosophical. That's an interesting one, I think. It has to do with consistency of belief and coherence of belief. And I can't read this last thing I wrote, so I don't know. It begins with a B. Evidence for something. Yes.
And the last one is religious reasons, which kind of struck me as an offbeat kind of thing. Like, why do you believe in religion? For religious reasons. Like, that's.
Yeah. Well, you could say why you have faith, but mostly it's writings, scriptural writings for whatever you believe, or spiritual context, and a spiritual leader can do that as well. So those are the 4 categories of reasons why people believe what they believe. Give some reasons why you believe what you believe. Yeah.
I'm going to answer, but I also have a question. Were we supposed to do this? Or we just put it all together? And also I would say, well, I mean, it's
You're supposed to read about
it.
Yeah.
So I would say, start off with because my parents believed it, but it's more because when you look at the world, you look at the evidence around us.
Yeah, I think all of us, anyone who grows up in a Christian home, kind of just really, whether it's a Christian home or not, your position becomes your by default becomes your parents' position, whether that's atheism or Islam or whatever. I remember, maybe I've told you this before, but I led the FCA at Miller North for a number of years with Sam Parker, and we were doing this thing at the beginning of the meeting, and there's a new girl there, and it was like popcorn questioning each other. And so Stan looked at this new girl and said, "So how did you come to know Christ?" And she said, or how did you become a Christian or something like that. And she said, well, I'm an American, aren't I? That, she just figured, well, that's what I am by default. Probably her parents, she had some family background. And that's often what causes us to believe. Yes.
Actually, I said experiential things. I don't know if that should be another category or if it just fits into philosophy because philosophy is like based on evidence, right?
Yeah.
Like I've seen and lived in the power and truth of God personally, which has been enough evidence for me. Like I've mentioned before, like the testimony of someone who's been changed by the gospel is something that you can't prove or disprove, and it's something that you can hold on tightly. It's not always something that you can convince someone else with, but it's definitely something that holds your faith.
But they can't argue it.
Yeah, you
It's
can't
your
argue.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that kind of crossovers both with religious and philosophical. Anything else? I agree with those who have spoken. I mean, as a young girl, I went to church, so I believed in Jesus. I was really a pretty spiritual young child. But then I walked away from that. I don't know that I totally walked away from it, but I certainly didn't live it out for a number of years. And then at 17, that changed. But that was more experiential, and I would say that into my adult years, as I walked with Christ, that what I've seen, what I've evidenced, what I've learned about truth, and frankly, in teaching this class, has made me more and more certain of my faith. By the way, if you want to grow in your faith, teach Sunday school, just, give a speech to your youth, whatever, it'll grow you in your faith. So you read this dialogue between Dr. Sire and the students. What do you think were some of the main points of that? That's on page 52 and 52 and 53. And he was what was he attempting to do?
Basically asking them which source was credible, which was a credible foundation to actually.
And what is? Yeah.
Most credible.
Yeah.
Philosophical. Philosophical. Because it's the only one based on evidence.
That's good, yeah. And that's where we're headed. I'm not going to tell you to believe in Jesus because I do, or because the Bible says so. The Bible does say so, and I do believe the Bible. But how do we know the Bible's true? And that's a big chunk of what we're going to talk about this year. How do we know it's true? Number 4. Out of the 4 reasons of belief, sociological, psychological, religious, and philosophical, which reason do you tend to use for Christianity? And as I just said, what I wrote down here is what I just said. Philosophical now, but sociological as a younger person, youth and a child. So write down your answer there. Excuse me. Then finally, what's the role of an apologist? Aiden?
Isn't it like to defend the faith?
Yeah.
What's the word? There's a scripture. Contend.
So it's someone who contends for the faith. It's someone who, what was the first thing you said? That defends the faith. What were you gonna say?
Isn't it also like it's part of that, but also going against other faiths, if that makes sense? Like proving how their faith can be the only one taking down others.
And by extension, of course, two contradictory things can be true at the same time in the same sense. So if Christianity is true, then none of the other religions is true. Has the truth. Anyway, they have truth in them, but they don't have. Here's what I would like to have you write down for that. That was good, but I want to make sure you have this definition. Someone who shows how good reason and evidence supports or contradicts a particular belief. So someone who shows how good reason and evidence supports or contradicts a particular belief. So we're not just talking about Christian apologists. Christian apologists are not the only apologists. This is the general term for an apologist. But the point of this year is for us to show through good reason and evidence that Christianity is true and the Bible is reliable and Jesus is the Christ and all of that. That's the role of an apologist, and we're all going to be kind of budding apologists. Now, here's what you're going to do on your own. You're going to pick up where you left off on page 54. I'm going to go double check with my plan book, but and this is okay. First of all, I need to have you do this. I need you to turn to the very back of the book where they have the whatever that thing is called, the index, the general index, to page 441. 441. And go down to the very end of the general index, the last word in the general index. Everybody there? Okay. So under Z, you should have only Zechariah. Does anybody have something in addition to Zechariah? Excellent. They made a new version of the book. It just, all it did was it expunged a couple of things from a former, now deceased apologist who, after his death, it became clear that he had not stellar life. And so they expunged that from his, in our school, it has expunged, and it's really unfortunate because it was really sad. But yeah, so I wanted to make sure everybody has the correct, because the section you're about to read would be different than it would have been in the other books, which is why I did it. So page 54, you're going to begin reading about Eastern and Western logic. And then you're going to stop when you get, I'm going to double check this, but where it says concept agnosticism, should we be agnostic about it? So concept agnosticism, should we be agnostic about it, at the top of 59. And then you're going to do some questions. I need to go back and look at the, well, I can probably figure it out from here. So in your little atheist book, you're going to do number 1. You could have already, that's from the last reading, but And then you're gonna go through,
So we only do 1 through 3, class 4 is English.
yeah, 1 through 3, that's it. Just do 1 through 3. So read those pages, do 1 through 3. Again, if you're diligent, you'll likely get it done.